what is the secret of the Mimic? Well, figuring this out was no easy feat. In fact, it was a group effort worked on by FNAF theorist homies Ghost and Mochiibun with a little touch from me. And with all that work, I believe that we have accurately predicted what might be the actual secret that this game's been working up to. And that is that the Mimic is possessed by none other than David Murray. This idea comes from one single line I think we all missed originally in The Storyteller that has the chance to change everything we thought we knew about what was going on in the series. In The Storyteller, after gaining access to the Tiger Rock head containing the Mimic 1 program inside the Storyteller, Edwin spends days on end in there doing something we don't get to see until Mr. Burrows goes to investigate. When he does, he finds Edwin not only dead inside the Storyteller tree from a lack of oxygen when Mr. Burrows sealed the tree, but the interior of the tree has now been entirely covered in construction paper with various writings. Some of it ranges from stick figures to random shapes and even mathematical equations. But what matters is what's written on nearly every sheet of paper. I'm sorry. Now, what we all must have missed when reading this story is that Edwin Murray wouldn't be sorry to the Mimic. Of course, he did take all of his anger out on it following David's death, but there's nothing he could reasonably see in the Mimic's programming during the Storyteller that would make him need to be sorry. That is, except for if he realized what he was looking at in the code was his own son. David Murray is possessing the Mimic, imbued in its programming even in the Storyteller. And if you're wondering how something like that could even happen, I think we know exactly how. Think about what plushies mean in the FNAF series. We've already seen that plushies are often used to represent a character's very soul, often imbued with their memories, and that's no different in the Mimic. Just like Henry Emily pouring his agony and grief into the EliteRobo, Edwin Murray spent nearly 2 weeks in a fugue state, not even remembering how much he probably cried into and over his son's own Tiger Plushie, a plush he does remember taking from the Mimic sometime during those weeks. We were able to see the signs of what was going to happen here even from the very first page of the Mimic. David's connection to this Tiger Plush and how much grief his dad is pouring into it means he doesn't just move on when he dies, but instead goes on to find a seat for his soul in the Tiger Plush itself. Though that's not where things would end for him. The Mimic story ends with Edwin no longer crying into the Tiger Plush, but taking all his anger and agony out on the Mimic. And that moment might be exactly where the transfer happens of David's soul into the Mimic, following the flow of Edwin's agony. This is quite literally one of the final lines of the Mimic's story. At some point during Edwin's assault, Mimic had toppled over, and he now lay, arms bent, in one last tragic copy of Edwin's little boy. The Mimic doesn't just copy David, he becomes him, either through Edwin's memories, or more likely the flow of his agony leading David's soul straight into the Mimic, which is something that takes Edwin decades to even realize. And when he does, all he can be is sorry to the child he lost. But before any of that happens decades later, what's important here is what happens to David just before Secret of the Mimic. Remember, Edwin doesn't stay gone. With this new Fazbear pay package, he comes back and continues to work on the Mimic without realizing it's containing his own son. Thanks to that, he probably makes things infinitely worse, as I guarantee you with David imbued in the Mimic 1 program, the more Edwin takes the program and puts it into a new machine, the more he shatters the soul of his own son. Just like with Andrew the Crying Child, David is being shattered across the franchise's technology, and that, as usual, is going to come with some grave consequences. Did you ever wonder why the Glamrocks start to act the way they do after the Storyteller starts to mess with their programming? Or perhaps why a character like Glamrock Chica would become so attention-seeking? Or Glamrock Freddy would start to act like a pouty, spoiled brat when he doesn't get his way? Some of the Glamrocks' new behavior match up exactly to those of a young kid, and that would be no surprise if it just so happened that there was a spirit of a young boy possessing the Storyteller's program this entire time. This type of thing is even something I guarantee you will end up seeing in Secret of the Mimic. One final line in the Storyteller from Edwin has always stood out to me, where upon seeing into the Mimic's code for the first time, he ends up thinking it is happening again. This is following his contemplation over why the Pizzaplex had started to malfunction and change so dramatically, and I think that's something he's absolutely seen happen before at his very own factory, which might even be the reason he left again in the first place. We're gonna see a plethora of Murray code technology in that factory, all containing the Mimic 1 program, meaning a bit of the shattered soul of David, causing everything to malfunction. So if that's really the Mimic's final secret, then what does that matter? Perhaps you'll have realized that the implication that David is in the Storyteller, aka an installation built built using the Mimic's original decapitated head means that the head David possesses is no longer the Mimic's. We may see David possessing the Mimic in this game, but by the end of it, we'll have severed it from the body, meaning that by the time we come to see the Mimic in ruin, David's not in there. And interestingly, this actually somehow checks out with a lot of what fans were wondering about. Theorists have pointed out here and there that the Mimic's personality seems to inexplicably change quite a bit across the timeline, and I think the Mimic losing its head may actually be the perfect explanation for why. While the Mimic we're about to face off in this game would have a heavy connection to David and the Tiger Plush, mainly fueled by the violence of Edwin Murray, the Mimic we've seen in the epilogues and beyond is actually quite different. No longer paired with the original head containing David, the Mimic's abilities are the same, but it's no longer fueled by violence. We see from its own perspective in the epilogues where it's simply following the orders it was given to dismantle things shaped like endoskeletons, not just being simply violent for the sake of it. Unlike in Secret of the Mimic, it'll actually be doing exactly what it's instructed to do. However, that idea creates a bit of a redundancy. If the big twist of this game is that David's possessing the Mimic, but by the time we actually meet the Mimic it's not possessed, then what was the whole point? Why would that secret be so important if by modern times it didn't matter anymore? Well, I think that's because even after the storyteller, David isn't gone. That original Mimic head containing David's soul is still out there, and it found its place in none other than the Tangle. For months, theorists have been speculating that the discarded parts of the storyteller likely ended up as what would become the Tangle, combining with animatronic parts from the Fazbear Funtime service and maybe even the tangled bodies the Mimic ended up massacring in the epilogues. But now this reasoning gives a whole new meaning to the idea. The two big bads of Security Breach and Ruin just so happen to be two sides of the Mimic. One the original body and the other the original head, controlling the massive bodies the Mimic has left in its wake. That might also give a whole new light to the Burn Trap ending where the Tangle doesn't go after Gregory or Freddy, but the original Mimic body itself. We can even see some importance in the Tangle's use of a Funtime Freddy mask. Although this isn't a white tiger head, which I guarantee would make the Tangle look infinitely more badass, it is at least the closest thing you've got to a white tiger head. After all, we've seen a branch of the Mimic tend to strangely love representing itself as Helpy, which is as close as you get to Funtime Freddy, meaning there may be some strange connection between Helpy and Funtime Freddy that somehow relates to the Tangle. But wait, if I remember correctly, in one of Candy Cadet's stories in Help Wanted 2, he talks about a little boy being used by a witch to mislead and lure the main character into their death. We know pretty confidently that that character is Cassie's dad, and the witch is definitely Glitchtrap, which would probably make the little boy Helpy, the same character that guides Cassie through her journey. Helpy, a character connected to Funtime Freddy, representing a little boy, is 100% David Murray. With that branch of the Mimic we see in Ruin that even argues with the Mimic itself, somehow coming from the original head, or even somehow the Tangle. So, even with the Mimic's secret exposed, where does the story go from here? In the end, how are we going to end the Mimic? Not stop it, that certainly hasn't worked thus far, but fully end it. Likely by not only putting the Mimic to rest, but freeing David's shattered soul as well. We have to put the pieces of David back together, and just like the crying child, I think we might know how. Call it a hunch, but I think that just like in FNAF 4, Secret of the Mimic will have a box. Maybe not the box, but a box. And that box, just like the crying child's, will contain the pieces put together. Maybe it's his tiger plushie like the crying child's, or maybe it's something else. But whatever's in that box will be the key to putting David back together and ending this cycle of horrors once and for all. So that is the complete story of Secret of the Mimic, all decoded before the game even releases. We definitely covered a lot of content here that's worth its own little Secret of the Mimic bingo board, and there's definitely still more I couldn't cram into this video. So if you thought that was a lot, we're just getting started. I'll see you all soon for Secret of the Mimic.